ladies and gentlemen, I'm incredibly pleased and proud to introduce the very first episode of the West Texas Slant. My name is Christian Lombardini. I am your host. This time, on this episode, as I introduce our eminent host, the founder of the West Texas Slant, Mr. Dusty Roach. Dusty, how are you, boss?
I'm doing great so far. I'm a little...
Overwhelmed?
Yes, that one, that big long one. The overwhelmed is definitely applicable. So
I got you. I had to cash a check for 50 cents for that word.
You did?
I couldn't afford it. Yeah, I had to. Dusty, let me ask you, and you and I have had many private conversations
Yes.
Regarding your background, regarding your drive and what you want to do. But tell me a little bit more in this context. Why did you want to start a podcast, and why did you want to call it the West Texas Slant?
Well, it comes up that I'm very partial to West Texas. It is unique in so many different ways. I meet people from all over Texas, and they're all great. I meet people from all over the United States, all over the world. But West Texas is very unique in of itself, in the sense of the people. The terrain, it's a little different as well. It's pretty barren. It's so flat that a friend of mine told me that you can stand on a paint can and watch your dog run away for 6 days. But anyway, it's the people are special, and there's a lot of people that are talented, well known, and few know about them. And I want to showcase West Texas.
I really and sincerely appreciate that. Obviously, we live in Midland, Texas. This is where we are, and we are the capital of the Permian Basin. And I understand, you're right, the austere nature of the physical environment out here, it lends something to a very special kind of person that can hack it, they can put up with it, especially working in oil and gas, which the majority of people out here do. And you worked in oil and gas, right, Dusty?
Only since 1971.
Really? Those are rookie numbers, actually. But okay, we'll let it go. We'll let it go. So since 71?
Yes, the first 30 years was in operations, and since then it's been in safety, and there are some gaps in there where I had to work other jobs during downturns. There's been 8 of them or 9 of them so far. I lose count now, but it's a tough business for tough people, whether it's mental, physical, or spiritual. It's a very big challenge.
I really appreciate how you said that. And of course, with the amount of time you've had, you've seen more than a few downturns. But let me ask you this. When you had to do something different outside of oil and gas during one of those downturns, what was the most interesting thing you did?
Was retail.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because I got to actually see a lot of different types of people, learn their personalities and how to deal with people. Because in the oil field, it's semi-crass the way you deal with people. It's very direct. And but in the retail, I had to learn to polish my delivery on it and be more aware of people's feelings. And that's the largest adjustment that there was, is just learning how to deal with people, and usually in retail you deal with problems. That
Right.
is the only time the manager gets to get in action. But unfortunately, I never had anybody come up and say, I need to speak to the manager because it's really great service and great product.
That doesn't happen.
No.
So working in retail, and I understand, because and you and I have discussed this, and speaking with my wife, I think that I'm being neutral, and she finds it very aggressive, because oil field neutral talk is very aggressive to
Yes,
citizens.
it is.
It's very aggressive. But let me ask you this. Once you were done working in retail, did that help you when you went back to oil and gas?
It absolutely did. It made me more aware of, I was not very fond of white collar businessmen, people, because working in the field it was a little bit more crass, blunt, and tough, and you could speak exactly how you felt. And then when you got into retail, you have to watch language, number one, and it's also you have to be aware of other people's feelings. And in the oil field, that's not really a big concern when you're dealing with employees. And
Right.
stuff.
Right. But I think that part of the trend of that is also changing. Our good friend Bailey Midkiff, he mentioned,
Oh yeah,
yeah, he mentioned what he calls the 20-year shift. That
right.
every 20 years, you begin to see some of the older guys are cycling out and newer guys are coming in, and you begin to see more of a change. Um, I also understand that the oil field can be very rude and very crude, but we're still talking with men, and men
Yes.
are people, and we have
Yes.
feelings.
Exactly right.
We have desires and we have dreams. So, right, I'm glad that you actually got something from that experience. It was very important. So you started in 71,
Yes.
1970. What was your first job?
It was roughnecking, working floors, because I was a worm, and I went out with a friend that his father worked overseas, and he knew somebody in West Texas, because most everybody overseas experiences some part of West Texas. And he said it was the day after high school. He goes, "Hey, my dad can get us a job in the oil field." And I'm going, "Well, that sounds great." And at the time, minimum wage was $1.69, and he said that we could make $3.50 an hour.
Holy cow!
I know it was tall cotton there, and so
Heck yeah!
we went out and we started roughnecking, and that was the start of it.
Wow. Okay, so you started roughnecking, and you were 18.
Yes.
And I'm just gonna take a guess here. You were probably built like a brick house.
I certainly was, and I miss those days. But no, I played football and stayed in sports, and in the spare time I even boxed a little bit in
Really?
Golden Gloves. That was unique. I pretty much led with my face.
I can
But-
tell by your nose. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was a learning experience, and then after that, I latched on to a driller that his name is Homer Mellis, and I want him to. I'll tell him that I mentioned his name. He was a Vietnam veteran, served a couple of tours, I think maybe 3, and was in the middle of it. He wasn't back behind the lines guy. He was in the middle of it in the jungle. And then when he got out, he had a very rough, unique personality, and fortunately, unlike some of the people in the oil field, safety was important from him from the day one. And if we did anything unknowingly that was dangerous, he taught us the whole thing. And that was my introduction to safety, but it wasn't from a safety guy.
Right. And was safety as such as it is today? And I know that I already have an inkling of the answer. But what was safety like back in the mid 70s?
Safety represented the safety personnel, if you ever saw them, would be between 10 and 12 o'clock because they didn't want to miss a meal. And when they came out, it represented a loss of bonus because they would find some insignificant little thing that you weren't doing correctly, and then take the bonus out, and it became where safety people and personnel were resented a great deal.
But there was, and it's funny because I'm going to assume it was hard hat and steel toe boots. Did you even have FR clothing back in the 70s?
Not even.
Not even.
No, occasionally we would do T-shirts, and if it got too hot, we would take them off and work
Yeah.
bare chested. But we did have the hard hat, gloves, and boots.
The hard hat, glove, and boots. Wow. And that's a lot different from today, where depending on what you're doing, you have to get fully suited up, hard hat, shield, goggles,
H2S monitor.
H2S, right? If you're doing CLO2, like I used to, CLO2 monitor, you got all these monitors hanging off of you. And you're wearing about 40 pounds worth of safety gear at a certain point, right?
Oh, yeah.
Forget putting on a harness.
Yeah, the harness was great. And
Right.
Working the derrick, usually we would cut back on some of the safety equipment up in the derrick because safety men weren't going to climb the derrick and see.
Right, there you go. Well, that's why they were in safety, because they couldn't cut it being a full.
Right.
Sorry, no offense. So you started in the 70s, and you started as a driller, right, on the drilling side.
Yes.
On the drilling side. And your career led you to travel as well. Where did you travel?
Well, I worked a long time on a land rig in Italy, and that was tough duty and it was 30 days on, and 30 days off.
Wow.
And in between one of those hitches, my wife flew over and we traveled all over Italy. And it was a tough gig, but somebody did have to do it, and so we opted to help out.
Right.
And the other one was not so much fun. It was on an island. It was off Borneo on an island called Balikpapan, which was a smaller island, and it was I won't mention the company name, but it was a helicopter rig, and we flew it in a piece at a time with the big old Sikorskis.
Wow.
And then when I went over there, it was during the monsoon season, and I was curious as to why no one was wearing a raincoat. And so I asked where one was, and he goes, well, it's under that metal bench. Just go over there and grab you one if you want it. And I'm going, well, of course, I'm from West Texas. We have common sense. And I put the raincoat on, and within 10 minutes, I took the raincoat off because I was just as wet on the inside as I was the outside from sweat, the humidity, and everything else. So, and it was an incredible learning experience and I learned that I never want to go to the jungle again.
So you're in the jungle in an island off of Borneo during monsoon season. Now,
Yes.
were you working day shifts or night shifts?
It was pretty much 24/7, but it was half the shift, or half of the 30-day shift was days, and the other half was nights. And the nights were horrible, too, because we had a lot of lights on the rig during the night when we were drilling, and they had these huge bug blowers because the bugs were incredible.
Right.
And they had this bug called a rhino beetle, and it was they would fly into you 90 miles an hour and slap you in the face or the chest and leave a welt, you know.
Wow.
They were big and ugly, and I don't ever want to see another one again.
You don't want to see another one again? Okay. Well, because again, a lot of us have experience, boots on the ground experience, but traveling to Borneo and traveling to Italy is not usually part of that.
Right.
And luckily, and again, I'm speaking from my experience, but I would have to say for everyone's sake, we were lucky enough to avoid seeing some of the things that you saw, and you had an experience with one of your friends, and I know it's painful, but if you wouldn't mind kind of describing a little bit about your friend and what that was like.
And I appreciate that so much because it was probably my introduction into safety in the worst way possible. I was a driller, and the superintendent came on board. We had gone in to the hole when we had already set secondary intermediate casing, and we were going to drill out, and we went in too early and got into some green cement, and we got stuck. And so I contacted the superintendent, and he came out, and he yanked on it, and unsafe manner. And then he started pressuring up on it. So anyway, he pressured up at an ungodly amount of pressure. And he says, go down and hit the pop-off valve. And it wasn't the regular Otico valve. It was a different kind of valve that had a handle on it. And he said, go release it. And I indicated that I would not, because that's abnormal pressure, and pipe separates during that kind of pressure. And so I started to go down the stairs to the back side. We had an elevator on one side, but it took you up. But I started to go down, and my best friend that traveled with me and my wife, showing us touring all of Italy, his name was Luciano Smigliani, and we called him Charlie. And I believe Luciano was for Charlie. I'm not sure. I don't speak Italian. Well, I do, but not well, with the West Texas accent.
Right.
And I started down, and Charlie knew exactly what I was going to do. And he reached over and grabbed the lever and opened up the pressure to blow it out into the reserve pit. And when it did, the pipe separated, and the pop-off linkage spun around and hit him in the back of the head and decapitated him. And that was probably my first time that I'd seen anything so gruesome, horrible, and it still is in my mind. And so anyway, I run down there, and everybody was yelling and screaming, and my boss left location, jumped in the Jeep, drove to Rome, and skedaddled out of the city. Yeah, he left me hanging, holding the whole bag. And in that, in Italy, if you have a fatality back then, I don't know how it is now, if you had a fatality at a work location, it's a murder charge. And so they wouldn't let me leave Italy for 6 weeks, and that was quite traumatic as well. They didn't incarcerate me or anything, but it was just horrific. And to this day, I carry his memory. He was from Australia. So when me and my wife would drive along and we would travel together, he brought his girlfriend they were engaged to be married. And Charlie and I would speak with each other, and then we would both translate to our partners. And he would speak Italian with an Australian accent. I would speak English with a West Texas accent. And my wife said the next day, that when we took the trip, she goes, it's like being in a foreign movie. But it's nothing but fond memories. And we got to see the Sistine Chapel and the Vatican and the Colosseum and everything. But the four of us traveled all over, and it was quite a great experience. So.
Traveling seems to also be a little bit of a theme with you. I know that we had spoken a little bit about how much you love energetic places like New York.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. What? I mean, I think that it's kind of obvious, but what does traveling to New York do for you? What does that feel like for you?
It's exciting. It's tense. My sister is an actress. She's married to Richard Karn, the guy on Home Improvement. He played Al. But prior to that, I would travel back and forth through New York, and I would stay over and visit with her. And when we did, and then they ultimately got married, of course, but when she was working, I would walk the streets, and I found it just, there's an atmosphere that you can't describe. It's energetic. People are hustling and bustling, and even the movies that are well done don't depict the feeling that you get when you're in New York City proper. And I found the people to be incredibly nice, and I spoke to them because we speak to everybody, and it kind of catches them off guard.
Right.
But and then my wife and I, one time, when we came back together, we were walking down the street, and I was dipping some Copenhagen, trying to find another can of Copenhagen, which is pretty hard in of itself. And we were walking along, and I spit, but I scooted over to spit in the street. And we kept walking, and then all of a sudden I get a nudge on the shoulder, and I turn around, and it's a mounted policeman on a horse. It was the horse that nudged me.
Huh.
And he goes, "Sir, can you turn around?" I go, "Yeah. What can I help you with?" He goes, "It's against the law to spit in the street in New York." I had my cowboy hat on, so he was tipped off as to what was going on. And he goes, "Well, son," because I was younger then, he goes, "It's against the law." And I go, "Well, where do you want me to spit? On the sidewalk? That's gross." And he goes, "Well, that's illegal too." And I'm going, "Oh, well, I guess I'll quit dipping while I'm in New York." So, but the off Broadway and the Broadway plays were unbelievable. You can't describe them unless you've experienced it. And I found the people that were incredibly nice and accommodating, and my cowboy hat tipped them all off. It was before even the TV show McCloud, where he was kind of out of place as well. And then we did all the tourist things. We saw the trade towers and experienced that, but we went up in the Empire State Building. That was incredible because the risk that they took, back then they didn't have OSHA, and there were people that took advantage of that, and it was just impressive. And then we did the tourista things like the Statue of Liberty. I was a little disappointed. I thought it would be much larger than
Right.
it was.
It is very small, yes.
And it was green at the time. I think they cleaned it, didn't they?
I believe so, but I will always remember it as green.
Okay. And we did the park. What's that?
Central?
Central Park. That's a big old park.
Yes, it is.
And anyway, it was just fascinating, and we saw some shows, and we just got to experience it. And we even had an earthquake while we were there.
Really?
Yeah, I slept through it because I was in the earthquake in Italy that killed like 79,000 people back in 1980.
Wow.
But I slept through it. My wife's shaking me and saying, wake up, it's an earthquake. Do we need to go down?" I'm going, "If it's an earthquake, we'll go down." So
Right.
don't worry about it. Just go back to sleep. But anyway, I just found the people were nice. It's obviously crowded, and they had a story as well, and that's what I liked about New York.
Interesting. Your love of the arts, such as the theater and literature, those primarily come from your mother. Is that right?
That is correct. She wanted me to write, and I thought that was silly. Nobody could make a living on writing, and I found that to be wrong. But she wanted me to be involved with all the arts and ballet and theater, and I was in a couple of productions locally there in San Angelo, which that's another place that my heart. Whew, that's a great place. Everybody in San Angelo is top notch. But anyway, so they would have Fiesta del Concho, to where they would have boats go down the river and through town, and Fort Concho, and they also had emphasis. And I was always surrounded by people that had the arts, and I like paintings, and met a few of the artists, and it's just it was a great life in San Angelo, as it is here in Midland.
Right. And you were born in San Angelo, is that right?
No, actually, I was born in Amarillo, Texas,
Oh,
during a dust storm,
really?
and they named me William Ross, and my uncle, Uncle Matt, he said, well, I think we ought to name him Dusty and for the weather that we're having. And my mom said, oh, heck no. I cleaned that up.
Thank you.
But she goes, no, his name is William Ross, and they called me Dusty ever since after the dust storm.
When was the last time anyone has ever called you William Ross?
Usually it's when I get stopped by a policeman for speeding or not turning on my signals.
Something like that.
Yeah,
10 for it. And it's funny because when I met you, I think like most people would assume that your name was Dustin.
Right.
Right. But no, it certainly is not that.
No.
Now, your mom was a teacher. Is that right?
Yes.
And she taught English, is that correct?
For, I think it was 40-something years.
For 40 years. And so, with that level, why do you still speak the way you do?
That's a good
That's a
question.
good question.
And I can turn it on. When I do speaking engagements or anything else, I try to lose the accent, which is very difficult. And I try to enunciate, which is even harder. But it's just one of those deals to where I was raised in West Texas, and that's where we're going to go.
That's what we got.
Yeah.
Look, so you started in the 70s, and you started as a roughneck. You did drilling, you traveled, and then I would think that the last decade or so, you've been in safety, right?
24 years.
24 years. And you've recently drawn that part of your life to a conclusion, is that right?
Yes. I retire next week from the position I was in. I'll never retire from safety.
Right.
And when I was introduced with the opportunity to go to safety, my response was, hell no. I don't like to cuss, but that's what my response was. He goes, Dusty, you've been in operations in the oil field. What would you think about doing safety? And I'm going, no. And then my response, and he asked me, why not? And I said, well, they don't know anything. They regurgitate the rules and laws and stuff of OSHA and MSHA and all of the entities. And when they come out, they're in their Dockers. And back then it was a Galaxy 500. Everybody, that was what company men and officials drove to be important. And they would come out and catch something, write you a ticket. Get me rapid. We can cut that. But they didn't know the job that we were doing. And they just knew the rules. And when I got into safety, I said, I'll do safety, but I'm going to do it from the perspective of the working man.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to know what you're looking at before you know the dangers. You can read the book and it'll talk about dangers, but until you've had a fatality and delivered a death message, you don't know what the safety rules mean. And so that's where it became important, and I do love safety.
I really appreciate that because you and I have had a lot of conversations about safety. Obviously, I'm a veteran of the oil field as well, and I remember I told you when it comes to safety guys and gals, but safety in general, you either find people who aren't worth a damn, or they're some of the greatest people you'll ever meet. There's really not much in between when it comes to safety, in my opinion, from what I've seen. So now you've transitioned out of that and you've started this podcast. What made you want to do a podcast?
There's a couple of things that are important to me. One of them is I wanted to affect or effect, I don't know which one it is, but one of them is proper. I wanted to make a difference and try to persuade people to get more active in politics. That's the first one.
Okay.
And the second one, reason I wanted to, is to introduce and interview people and find out what makes them so fascinating and important, and let people know what they've done, because most people in West Texas don't go around bragging about what they have accomplished. You can sit next to a billionaire. I think that's a real word.
Yes.
And you'd never know that they invented the watch.
Right.
I mean, but
yeah,
it's being silly, but that's accurate. They and so I want to, and while they're doing it, they're very unassuming, they're very polite, they're very down to earth, and there's so many of them that I want people that I know that are very special to be recognized, and most of the time they'll be very humble about it, but I want people to know about them because they've impacted a lot of people's lives.
So the West Texas Slant is sort of and this is my words, right? I'm seeing it as a culmination and a bringing together of a few different things for you. So one, I know that you just have one of the biggest hearts of anyone I've ever met. And that's one of the reasons why I love you deeply, because you give, and it seems there's no end to the giving with you. And like I say, I sincerely, deeply love and appreciate that about you. And I understand that, in every life we see a lot of things. We see a lot of happy things, and we see a lot of sad things. And, everyone has their innate God-given dignity, and they have their God-given innate humanness that sometimes we don't always see, because we're always busy. We have to run back and forth, right? But man, are these stories not important if they're not some of the most important stories we'll ever hear?
That is exactly correct.
And I wanted to make sure that I understood from my heart to your heart why you wanted to do this project and why you wanted to have a podcast. But I think that speaking with the men and women of West Texas and highlighting their stories, I think is some of the greatest gifts that you can affect to everybody else. And I appreciate that. So what do you think? So how do you feel about the show? What do you think the show is going to have? What kind of mixtures of things do you think that your audience can look forward to in the episodes coming?
There are so many different people that share the same culture and history, but they are very specialized in what they do. And out of all of that, on top of that, they all have a big heart. You can sit there and you can visit, and we're polite and everything else, and if you see something wrong, West Texans, we're not the ones to stand back and watch. We get in there and we'll try to tell them politely, let's shut this down and talk about it. And very few people want to get involved these days. And the people that I'll be interviewing, there is a wide range of backgrounds and occupations and everything else, but we all share that right is right and wrong is wrong. And so I want people to be exposed to how it is down here.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know that you have a ton of fans on social media. I think you're rocking around 6,000 on Facebook. Some, around 5,000 on Twitter, X, right? Something like that. How many followers do you have on LinkedIn? I meant to look actually the other day.
I don't know.
You don't even know, but
it's up in, it's 4 digits.
Really? Okay, so you're definitely into the thousands. So it's really funny if you think about it, right? You know, you think to yourself, okay, I'm just this guy, I'm going to do my safety job. But when you think about it, you have close to 20,000 people that follow you, that care about your thoughts and care about the good things that you put into the world. And I'm very excited to see those numbers grow. I'm very excited for your show. And I'm very, very proud to be here and help you launch your show. What else? How else could we? What cherry do you have that we could put on the cap of this cake of this episode for today?
Well, that is a question that I've never heard nor thought of before this, but it's what I want to do is for people to start getting engaged. And the last time I checked, smiles and a hug did not cost a thing. And we need to start changing the culture back to the way it was where I grew up, and take an interest in everybody that passes by because they have a story. Not all of them are good, but at the same time, that can change. And in 2020, I believe I started going to church at Stonegate. I guess I can say that. They might not like it, but it changed my life. Then I did a walk to Emmaus and got very close in my faith. And so I don't go around and try to peddle it like it's some sales pitch. I try to live what the Word says instead of talk about it.
Right. And I believe that's what they say is they will know you through your acts.
Yes.
That's right. Well, with that being said, I think I'm going to speak on behalf of your audience. We're incredibly excited. You've got more energy and more verve than most people I've met, and that's saying a lot for West Texas. So I want to say thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity and allowing me the opportunity to interview you, which was your idea, and it was brilliant, for this first episode of the West Texas Slant.
And I thank you for helping me along because I'm a neophyte in the electronic world, and I'm trying to catch on. And I know what an XLR connection is now.
Now you do.
And but I thank you because I'm very excited, and my kids are going, Dad, you're 71. You don't do podcasts. I go, yeah, I do.
Yeah, I do.
And so, but it's just the support of you and the help from Caleb. It's going to be a fun ride, and I'm not enthralled with being the interviewee. I think I'll be better on the interviewer, but that remains to be seen. But I'm going to give it everything I've got.
And that's what, give it everything you've got. I can't think anything more Dusty Roach. I can't think anything more West Texas. With that, ladies and gentlemen, catch you on the next episode of the West Texas Slant with Dusty Roach. Well, then you know what? Here, let me go. All right, so we're rolling. All right, okay. Well, we're getting ready to record the first episode of the West Texas Slant. You gotta slide your S's. You don't slide your S's. I was sipping on my gazebo in my sarcophagus. I was rolling around in my truck. There's no reason to do that. I'm sorry. Okay, let me take this off. All right. I don't know what the hair looks like, and it sure don't matter.
What hair?
Thank you. Why don't you piss off? All right.
I can show you no hair.
This is going to have a no hair contest. That's what we need is a no hair contest.